In the gospel text of today, which is taken from Matthew chapter 13, verses 31 to 35, we will read two parables. And Matthew 13 is known as Matthew's parable discourse. And as we are coming towards the end of the parable discourse, in which there are 7 parables, we read 2 of them in the text of today, and both have a similar connection, both have a similar interpretation. The first is a parable about the mustard seed, but more than the mustard seed, Jesus prefaces the parable by saying the kingdom of heaven is like. So in other words, he's placing before us a simile. And he's saying the kingdom of heaven on the one hand is like what? Is like a mustard seed. One mustard seed. And according to Matthew, at least at that time for what they knew, the mustard seed, it is mentioned, is the smallest of all seeds. Of course, we know today that there are smaller seeds than the mustard seed, but the point is not so much agriculture or horticulture. The point is about the smallness. It has been calculated that 720 mustard seeds make 1 gram. So if 1 gram is 720 mustard seeds, we can see how minuscule, how small, how insignificant this mustard seed is. And Jesus is comparing this mustard seed with the kingdom. And notice, he doesn't say that the person sows mustard seeds. He says the person sows 1 mustard seed, and that 1 mustard seed is put into the ground and it grows 6 or 8 feet into what Matthew calls a tree. Even though the mustard grows into a shrub, Matthew insists that it is a tree, and not only does he insist that it is a tree, he tells us that this tree is so large that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. The point being made is the insignificance of the mustard seed on the one hand, the smallness of the mustard seed on the one hand, and the huge mustard shrub on the other. So from little to much, from small to big, this is the point which Matthew makes about the kingdom. And if it is not clear, he brings another parable. Here he involves a woman. If the first parable concerned a man, the second concerns a woman, because in the kingdom there will be no distinction. In the kingdom there will be no higher, there will be no lower. In the kingdom everyone is equal. And so he speaks about a woman who brings in a little yeast. The amount of yeast is not mentioned. He simply says that the yeast is taken, and what is mentioned, however, is the 3 measures of flour. So like the smallness of the mustard seed, the yeast is insignificant. The yeast is termed in English as sourdough. And sourdough is either made at home or bought from the bakery, and it is put into the flour which is kneaded, and the flour is yeasted, you might say. The flour is influenced, you might say, thoroughly by that little yeast. It has been calculated that the 3 measures of flour which Matthew mentions in the gospel text of today was enough to feed 150 people. So you notice again the littleness of the yeast, the smallness of the yeast, the insignificance of the yeast, and the large dough that is prepared through that little and small yeast. And so the point which Matthew makes is this, that it is very likely that our small good efforts might seem to us to be insignificant. When we reach out to one person in need, when we are kind to another, when we help a third without anyone knowing it, when we are positive in our lives, when we are generous with our time, when we are generous with our money, and it may not even be noticed, we ourselves might think, what difference are we making? At those times, we remember the mustard seed and the insignificance of the mustard seed. If the mustard seed was not sown into the ground, the mustard shrub would never appear. If the yeast was not put into the flour, the flour would not be leavened. In other words, the mustard seed is required to be sown into the ground. The yeast is required to be put into the flour. Our small actions are required, are necessary for the flourishing of this kingdom. And like from the small mustard seed and the little yeast, there was the great mustard shrub and the enormous dough, so also through our small, insignificant actions, the kingdom will be brought by the Lord who inaugurated it 2,000 years ago. Will you continue your small, insignificant, minuscule actions of love and never imagine that they will not be transformed by the Lord into His glorious kingdom?